Welcome back, everyone, to Credit and Conversation. I'm your host, Owen Macaulay. Joining me in today's episode is Meghan Fitzmartin. I was delighted for this opportunity to speak with Meghan because she had recently adapted the story All-Star Superman by Grant Morrison and Frank Quilty into a new audiobook, which you can purchase now via Audible. All-Star Superman is one of the most prominent Superman stories of all time. It was a huge inspiration for James Gunn on the new Superman movie, which has just been released, so I thought this is the perfect time to release this episode as well. In addition to discussing the adaptation of All-Star Superman, I discussed with Meghan her work in other audio adaptations, her work as a staff writer for the TV show Supernatural. We also get to talk a little bit about working for comics as well, of course, where she worked on, as she written some of the Tim Drake Robin comics as well for DC Comics. I really enjoyed this conversation because Meghan maps out her journey as to how she ended up writing for comics, and it was really interesting to hold in parallel to some of the other speakers that we've had on the podcast. I've been speaking to creators across different generations, essentially. Some were very, upfront in saying they were fortunate that they were living in the city at the time that they were able just more or less to walk into the studios of these big companies and ask for an interview or a job. The modern experience much more different, but was very uplifting in my conversation with Meghan was she knew no one in the industry, and she says that herself, and I think that's a very encouraging message to share to those of you listening who have aspirations to go out and to work on certain characters or work for the big companies or to launch your own ideas. It's possible. You just have to, first and foremost, is you got to have that drive, but you also got to be willing to go out and create, to make stuff. Meghan was already writing and creating stuff as well prior to being signed by any major publisher. So I think it's really inspiring. It's very aspirational, and I think you're all going to really enjoy today's episode with Meghan Fitzmartin. Now, quick show note. Unfortunately, it's very ironic as well. Usually when I do these podcasts, a lot of our guests are outside of Ireland. So I will be speaking to people in the US, and there'll be a time difference. So typically, given the time zone, it'd be much later in the day, the evening. Meghan happened to be based in the UK at the time of the call, and apparently when I call at peak times, the Wi-Fi didn't seem to want to correspond with me as much. So my apologies in advance if we lose any signal there at all. But I always went back and got Meghan to repeat anything I think was missing in the recording. So my apologies if there's any drop in signal in today's episode. And so for now, sit back, relax, and enjoy this episode with Meghan Fitzmartin. Welcome, Meghan Fitzmartin, to Creator in Conversation. Thank you so much for taking the time out to speak with me today. And it is an exciting time because we're entering into the summer of Superman. It's in full swing, and you had a very special project, which the All-Star Superman adaptation. I've listened to it, I think, 2 or 3 times now.
Wow, amazing. Thank you.
I love audio adaptations. I love audio drama, audio books, and All Star is like one of the top, definitive Superman stories. But also, that to me suggests like it must have been so intimidating to have to go in and to adapt that. Maybe that's just for me looking in, but how did you find that process? First of all, how did the opportunity come up to adapt it, and then how did you find the process stepping in to adapt, one of the most renowned visually and graphics interpretations of Superman into a new audio form? So what was the origin story behind that?
Yeah, first of all, thank you so much for having me. This is such an honor. I'm a big fan of what you guys are doing and the people that you have and everything like that. Like I'm delighted by it. So thank you for having me. I got this opportunity because I had so I've been a big fan of audio for my whole life, which is not saying something in places outside of America, but in America, we don't have that tradition. We used to, and then we sort of moved away from it as TV became the sort of primary media. And so, but I grew up listening to audio. I was a big audio fan. And so when I moved to LA, and the whole reason I got into writing scripts in the first place was because I wanted to write audio. And so when I moved to LA, I sort of prioritized TV, frankly, because it would make more money so that I could do various other things that wouldn't make as much money. Um, and but I perpetually was like in every single person's ear. As soon as I met them, I'd be like, do you know what? Audio is really great. Like every single, I think I worked on a show called Supernatural, and every single person got so annoyed with me because I'd be like, what if we did audio though? Wouldn't that be really cool? Like audio? And they're like, Megan. And so I have been, and so I carried this through. I started working with DC Comics because I had been in the Warner Brothers world, and obviously DC Comics is owned by Warner Brothers, and so I'd been brought over to work on a couple different DC animated projects. And while I was there, I was like, audio is really popping right now. And they had gotten a deal with Spotify at the time, and so through that, I had been sort of working with a couple different people over there in terms of audio. And I had just finished up working on the second season of Batman Unburied, uh, and was in London sort of working on other projects and things. And I got an email from the folks over at Penguin Random House saying, hey, your name was put up for this project. And I was like, oh, like this sounds great. I knew the book, but I wasn't intimidated because I was so curious at the challenges, if
Hmm.
that makes sense. I think it was really helpful that it was a very like, so how? Like I'm honored and flattered and I'm absolutely going to do it. How do we do this? I think was the major question. And so it was kind of nice in that way because I wasn't like too terribly intimidated because I was just very focused on like, okay, so like this is a big challenge and I'm really excited about it, which I'm in retrospect very grateful for.
And, it's absolutely fantastic, and it's a completely unabridged adaptation as well. Which I was like, so how would this work? 'Cause even this isn't the first time the story was adapted. It was adapted
Right.
for animation, but
Yep.
even then they had to distill a lot for the direct to home release. But I won't give anything away because I want people to obviously listen in. But I found the mechanism of the narrator that you used throughout was fantastic, and that
Thank you.
really that was brilliant. It helped to make the marriage of the comic and audio 100% complete. I've been experimenting with audio adaptations myself in recent, well,
Amazing.
when early stages pitching to a few people, but what one of our proponents with it as well is accessibility.
Yeah.
Because this is opening up now All Star Superman for the very first time to an audience, and I
Yeah.
think that's wonderful as well. So no, that's amazing, and what a time for it to come out as
Yeah.
well. Was this always part of the wider Warner Brothers synergy for they knew they had a Superman release, or was it just coincidence the stars lined up?
No, I think people have been, you know, consider, like, you know that you have this big thing coming out. You know that you are going to be gearing up for it. Like there was definitely a sense of like, especially because James Gunn has been talking specifically about this book.
Hmm.
Um, there has just been a lot of, I think, stars aligning for sure, but at the same time you know that something is coming and you want to be a part of that and you want to, like, to your point, make it accessible. Like I think that one of the things that I really love about All Star Superman is that you don't have to have read a billion years of comics to understand what's going on in the book. Like you sort of get the sense of the history of the character within the book, which is really nice. So it's a really good starting point for a lot of people, but also at the same time, um, accessibility is a real thing. Like it's for a lot of people, comics are difficult to access and are difficult to engage with, and so having this be another opportunity, because comics should be for everybody, and these stories should be for everyone, these characters should be for everyone, and so trying to bring that in a time where we're all looking to the skies, as it were, like we're all looking to the movie coming up. So I think both.
Absolutely. And you mentioned you'd also worked on an audio adaptation as well. This was an adaptation for Batman. This is an original
Yeah,
fiction
yeah.
for Batman. So what was that like adding to the Batman legend then in a new medium? How did you find that approach?
Fun. I mean, I think I am in the weird sort of position of like the past few things that I've done for DC have all been new approaches to certain characters and stories. So I've written a couple comics for DC that is continuing the canon. I've written a couple movies for DC animation that have continued canon in various different ways. All-Star Superman was the first one that was just like pure adaptation. Um, and in many ways, it was interesting that like it felt more like a learning experience than anything else, just in terms of like how I highly encourage anybody that wants to write comics to try and reverse engineer or like do an like Scott Snyder has talked about reverse engineering before and like saying like look at this comic page and how would you reverse engineer that. I would take that a step further and say that everybody should try once in their life to like audio adapt a comic because I feel like I learned so much out of writing comics from adapting it in audio. Um, and that I think that was incredibly powerful and impactful, I think, for me and really, really studying it. I make the joke now that like I am a scholar of All Star Superman. You can ask me anything about it because I have like studied this book on a like textual level, on a like everything level. I have done like I did all of the research in terms of like I went and looked up a bunch of interviews that Grant Morrison did about the book to sort of get a sense of the story and understanding of the art as well. And like yeah, so I feel like I'm a scholar of this book at this point.
Did you have the opportunity to speak with Grant Morrison or Frank Quietly? I see Frank Quietly did a
You
new cover
did,
for it,
I
which is great.
know. Yeah, I unfortunately I didn't have any of the chance to sort of interact with them. All of this was done through Penguin Random House and
Hmm.
DC Comics, and so DC had reached out to them. Uh, but probably for the best because I'm a massive fan. So I think I would have been they would have looked they would have taken one look at me and been like, her this chick? I don't know about her. Which so it's probably for the best.
I know, I'm sure it would have gone grand. I actually missed out meeting Grant Morrison. He did a signing here in Dublin,
No
not so long ago.
way.
Yeah, it was so random. They were just in the city, and next thing, Forbidden Planet. I was like, wow. But
Amazing.
for yourself, you mentioned so you've done Batman, you've done Superman, you've written for comics and animation. So for you, what's your secret origin around this world and characters? What drove you into, comics and animation? Was it all around the same time? Did you discover animation before comics and transitioned into comics? Or was it just an organic, you're, just in the zeitgeist of it all?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a zeitgeist element to it. I grew up in a very conservative religious family, and so w- we were very sheltered. I used to joke that I've seen every movie made before 1960, um, just because that was the limit, kind of. But my dad was a massive comic book fan growing up, and uh, when we didn't have TV until I was 12, and that was around the time that a couple years later they started doing the Justice League animated show, which was I think to this day is still one of my favorite pieces of media. Like it was just fantastic. Like it rises above in so many levels. But also Batman the animated series, I would catch up and I would try and catch episodes every once in a while when I could. Um, so that was happening, and I was allowed to watch that. And but really, I think the moment that I knew I wanted to read comics, my dad took me to see Spider-Man, which was exciting, not just because it was Spider-Man, but it was exciting because it was a movie. We had seen Disney movies, I could see animated movies, um, but there there was no like hesitation around it. My dad was like, obviously this is a superhero movie and I am taking my daughter to see this. Like there was just this was just like a foregone conclusion, which was like really exciting for me. And so we went to see it and I was like, this is everything. I love this. I love this so much. And my dad was like, "Do you want to go read comics?" And I was like, "Yeah, yeah, let's go." And so he took me to a comic book store, and it wasn't until a couple years later that I found like my comic. I always say that like it's about the comic that you find, not that like is handed to you. That really gets you excited about comics. And so, but it was my dad really that sort of allowed it to be accessible for me. Like my dad had this reaction of like, yeah, of course you'll like comics because you're my kid. So like there is no there was sort of no ambiguity about it, which was really nice because in retrospect, it would have been really easy for me to be steered away from it because I am a lady, and so sexism is still pretty rampant. And uh, there, my dad has just never once in his life been like, why not? Why not? This is for you just as much as it's for me.
No, absolutely. And when you started writing for comics and all, your father must have been over the moon with the
Yeah. Yeah, he was much more of a Marvel fan though, so he's very like he's like learning about DC stuff, but it's still not exactly. He's like, I am happy for you. Call me when you get a Marvel gig, and then I was like, okay, cool, thank you, thanks, Dad.
That's the most parent thing ever.
Yeah, yeah, it's pretty great. 10 out of 10. Even with All Star Superman, I told him like a couple of weeks out because we were in Ireland visiting them, and because they had come to visit, and I was like, well, we're in London, let's go and see them. um and so I got a chance to tell them in person, and he was like, cool, and then moved on. And I was like, one day I'll write a Marvel thing and you will care, but right now you're like impressed, but not like it's not the thing yet.
And so, what was your first break into comics? So you've written for TV, film, and then comics. Did the TV and film side come before comics, or was it comics into it? It did. That's really interesting because throughout the podcast, I've been speaking with, various creators from different eras of comics, from the Bronze Age, the Silver Age. And the farther you go back, the sense is, well, if you lived in New York at a particular time, you could
Yeah,
walk in and just literally just walk in and ask for an
yeah,
interview. And now, the further to modern times you go, it seems to be because the companies recognize the inherent value in, the IP of it all. They look
yeah,
more towards, the games industry, the film, TV, before handing over, because whatever's in the comic could be the next R&D for a
yeah,
franchise of some kind. So let's start then. If film and TV came first, let's start how you broke into that
yeah.
side and then evolved into the comics. So, did you study in college media and such to get yourself ready for the industry?
Not at all. My degree is in church ministries. I was going to be a youth pastor.
Oh wow, that's a big, big
A
divergence.
bit of a leap, a bit of a leap. I always would say it was like my favorite. It's my favorite party trick, especially in LA, to like everybody talking about like what film school that they went to, and then I'd be like, yeah, I went to a small Bible college and I studied to be a pastor, and everyone being like, what? You do that? And I was like, listen, I think more people, if they want to be pastors, should actually go through some sort of training, but unfortunately they don't, and here we are today. Um, but yeah, I went to school to be a youth pastor because I grew up in a very like I am the oldest of five kids. I was always nannying. I was always working with kids, and I'm very much aware of the next generation in a way that like no one else seems to be. Definitely not in government, so we have to be.
Mhm.
Um, and so while I was doing my degree, I realized that what I wanted to do is to tell people that they are loved through stories, and the best way of doing that was to write the stories. And so I finished my degree, and then it was in Florida, and then I moved across the country. I knew nobody. I knew nothing. I had no idea how anyone had ever written for anything before. Like how do people write for TV? How do people write for comics? How do people write for animation? I wanted to do all of these things. Had no clue. I had all of the books. That was about it. I read literally everything. I moved to LA and I started taking classes There's a class that I loved that I think was the one of the best classes in LA. It's called Script Anatomy, and that was a their sort of model is like to help demystify a writer's room. And I was like, I don't even know what that is, but it was such a school for me and classes for me, not school specifically. I'm horrible at school. I'm so sorry. I could not, I struggle sitting. Sitting and listening is not my skill set. But uh, being in a room was such a helpful experience for me. And so there was a lot of those classes of that. And I started meeting people and I read and I wrote and I wrote and I wrote. I moved to LA and I got a job as a nanny. I was a nanny for a couple years, which was great because I learned the city. I had never lived outside of Florida before. Um, so I always would tell people when they first moved to LA, don't worry about getting your big break right off the bat. Just figure out the city. Just figure out who your friends are. Figure out where you're getting groceries. Like what is the nearest road to you that you're going to like run on if you're a runner. Like it's those sort of small pieces that make it home. uh and that was so useful. And so then I jumped over. My first industry job was for a theatrical marketing company, um which would make behind the scenes contents and EPKs and things like that. I jumped over as a PA basically, or a runner, and then got promoted to work as a business development coordinator, which essentially I like to call that I got paid to go to film school because that's what that was for me. Like that, I learned how to roll calls. I learned how to call people on the phone, which was a thing that I was very, very scared of. And now I am like, well, it's just faster if I do this. So it truly, I think, helped me with a lot of life skills. But I also learned about movie studios. I learned about the rise and fall of the business and all of those things. I left there because I knew I wanted to write, wasn't going to be able to write there. And I had changed the entire course of my life and expectations of my life. So I was like, well, I better write if I want to do this. So I got another sort of in entry level job in the Warner Brothers TV estimating department, which is like basically where they have all of their budgets for their TV shows. So I worked for the budgeting department for almost a year. Um, and the thing with that is that like I had interviewed for that job like 3 times and I got it on like the last time. Learned the studio, and it's what I call my home studio ever since. Like I made lasting friendships there, and I made a lot of really good. I just understood the ecosystem because I worked from the ground up there. Jumped over to a show called Supernatural, where I was assisting the showrunner. And that I got because I had made a point. I was like, I know I need to jump onto a show. That needs to be my next job. I want to meet everybody that I can. I made a spreadsheet basically of all of the potential shows and pilots that like were because I started that job in July, and come January, I was like, okay, cool. Now is the time. I need to start planning to jump onto a show. I made a spreadsheet of all the shows that I could jump onto that were feasible, that were reasonable. Um, all the people that I had connections to that like I knew somebody that knew somebody or did work on that show. And I would be like, hey, what can you tell me? Is there a possibility? Is there a chance? Is there an opening? What can I do? Um, and Supernatural was on that list. And the former showrunner at the time, Jeremy, he was moving over because he had a show called Frequency that got picked up, and so then my boss Andrew got that job, got the job of showrunner. He needed an assistant, and I had interviewed with him, but I also knew the whole like um, support staff for that show as well, and so I got on the show that way. Worked there until the show ended and got promoted to writer. Wrote on the last 2 seasons of the show.
Oh, wow. And given your religious background, working on a show like Supernatural, was there any kind of like back home, like your family were maybe perhaps taken a little aback that, wow, this is a, you've certainly made a big departure from whence you started, or was it just they were? They were
I
okay. I was like,
no, no. I have always been a bit. I wouldn't call myself the black sheep. I think my mom would bristle at that. Um, I definitely am not the black sheep of the family, but we don't have similar views on things. And part of the issue here is that I've actually read the Bible. And in fairness, so have my parents, but I've studied it and I have like I've done the whole shebang. I have gone to Israel and like studied it there. Like I there is a level of academia to scriptures that I find not a lot of people my parents are pretty okay with this, and but like a lot of people from back home are not. And um that became more the conversation topic, so they would like throw garbage understanding of scripture at me, and I'd be like, this is incorrect, and I can tell you it is incorrect because I have studied this and you're an idiot. um my parents unfortunately get a lot of the backlash on that, and that is not ever my plan. But my parents are a bit, they have seen enough of the show to see my name. I think that that's the extent of it. And fair enough, like it's not for everybody. That's fine. I don't care
yeah.
about that. But yeah, they were proud, a little baffled, and um it's not their thing, and that's fine.
I understand. It's as a funny aside, I'm aware of Supernatural, so my friends huge fans.
Oh, nice.
I've never had the chance to engage with it myself,
Sure.
like to follow it. But what's so funny is I got to know one of the actors, Jim Beaver.
Oh,
Yeah,
Jim.
yeah, he's a gent, and
Yeah.
how we got to know each other was he came over for Dublin Comic Con, but I
Yeah.
work on some of the Phantom comics, and he's a huge Phantom fan.
No
And we
way.
just got talking with each other, and I'm way behind, but I'm working on an original story with the longest running Phantom publishers in Australia through. But I reached out to Jim and I was like, would you like me to base the bad guy on you, like the villain, sort of if anything ever happened? He was like, yeah, he seemed to be all up for it. But that was like 2 years in development, but hopefully. But it's so funny because, just the supernatural being in the convention
Yeah.
circuit, like the fan base is worldwide, global.
Yes.
How have you found the convention circuit yourself, walking around? Have you done a couple of conventions yourself?
I have. It's funny. I Supernatural conventions are very different. I've been to one Supernatural convention in LA, in Burbank. Um and it's lovely, and like it is, I think that the show is well worth the fandom that it has. I think specifically the actors are some of the best people on the planet, so I'm always really delighted that like they continue to get the love that they absolutely deserve, because they're
Mhm.
just absolute professionals and also just the nicest humans. um but in terms of comic conventions, it's really interesting. I San Diego very much feels like summer camp to me at this point, because I've done San Diego since like 2016, and so like almost 10 years now. Um, I I think each convention has its own sort of DNA. Um, I love San Diego because it feels like summer camp, and because it feels like, oh, all of my friends are here and I get to see everybody, and like I'm not gonna sleep, and I'm probably gonna have 5 bites of food and way more alcohol than I should, but I know it and I plan for it and it's fine. Um, it's great, and like it's July right now when we're recording, and I've already been like, oh, okay, like I have to figure out like the schedule, and I've been putting it all together. Like all of that stuff is very fun for me. Um, Other conventions are really interesting. I think my favorite one that I've been doing the last few years has been MCM Comic Con.
Okay.
Uh, the in May, the London MCM Comic Con, which was the first international convention that I did. And I think I like international conventions more than the US,
Mhm.
um, because my audience and who I write for and who I care to write for are younger.
Mhm.
And they tend to be younger, queerer, and quite often more femme. And I love that. That is my heart space. It's what I write for. And so I find that American conventions do not always encourage that same audience. The smaller ones can, um, but it it tends to be specific to an older audience, which is fine. An older, more male audience. And I was like, that, I'm always like, that is fine. That is absolutely great. But my audience is not that. That's not necessarily who I write for. If they read my stuff and like it, great. 10 out of 10, love that. But I find that my audience tends to be much more international or more willing to go to the international conventions just because there's less stigma quite often.
No, and that's a very interesting point because, like as I said, I work on characters like the Phantom, very
Yeah,
old, and so
yeah,
the fan base there is like even older than the average comic fan base, which would be like
yeah,
say 30s to 50s. Phantom's probably youngest starting around the 40s.
yeah,
Disposable incomes there, that's what kind of supports
yeah.
it. But then the clock's ticking. Unfortunately, that's the reality of
I,
business,
I,
you know.
yeah, 100%. That's sort of what like my perpetual drum that I'm beating is like, if you only focus on disposable income,
Mm,
which is totally fair, and I get that as a business model, and I think that's something that like I definitely didn't have a full understanding of when I was coming into the business on its own of like that of understanding the disposable income business
mhm,
model of like who has the money to buy the books. I get it, but I also think, people are going to die.
mhm,
That
yeah.
that is the truth of it. If we do not establish inroads into these characters, because we know that these characters are beloved and there is good reason for them to be loved no matter the age. Like comics are for everyone. These characters can be for everyone, should be for everyone,
Mhm,
making it accessible for all ages. Um, which and for all types of audiences. Like there are a lot of groups that I talk to that are like, um, I just didn't know that comics were for me, or I didn't know that these characters were for me. Like because I have written, uh, I've one of the things that I've written for comics is Tim Drake. I wrote a comic of him realizing that he has feelings for a boy and going out with our dear sweet Bernard, and I have had kids come up to me. Um, they're not all kids, I guess. I have people younger than me come up to me. Uh, and say, I didn't realize that this was for me. I didn't realize I could read this. Like I having that realization of, oh, this is also for me. There are also representations of who I am as a person in this. Um, and that from a standpoint of wanting to make sure that everyone knows that they are loved is so incredibly important to me. And also from wanting to have a career in 20 years, that's very important to me because what that means is like, yeah, a younger generation may not have the disposable income. They
mhm.
will in 20 years. So, like, long term thinking rather than short term thinking, I think, is quite often a thing that I'm trying to push on every industry that I'm in, frankly, because that's not just a comics issue, that's an animation issue, that's a TV issue. Like, if we do not think long term, and a lot of these companies are not right now because there is no real reason for them to, um, the industries will collapse.
Yeah, no, and it's really interesting some of the points and themes you hit upon there. In that I had spoken to a couple of weeks back Paul Levitz, and he was saying during his run on Legion of Superheroes
Yeah.
that does a large queer audience that he wasn't aware of at the time, and
Yeah.
subsequently it was just the idea of, well, in the future it's so many, like you have like aliens and so many different interspecies, like it seemed like they could see themselves in a more positive
Yeah.
future because all of that was no longer the conversational point. And then just a couple more weeks after that, I was speaking with British comic writer, creator, an artist, Ben Dixon, and he was explaining the comic convention scene as well in the UK is that there's more of the queer representation
Yeah.
within the convention, which is great to see as well. More so, I think you're right, more so outside the US at the moment. Seems to be like across all in UK and Europe, we're seeing strong audiences there as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, to bring it back to the supernatural writers room, what was the transition point then from the live action to animation and film then for you then? So you managed to succeed in being staff writer with Supernatural, and then you ended up then, right, was it Warner's Animation, was it still called that? DCAU, yeah?
Yeah. I Warner's is a funny because they had like two. departments at the time that I worked there. There was the Warner's Animation Group, which I didn't work with, but then there was Warner Animation, which I did. Arguably, they were the same, but they were not the same, and I don't understand why.
Mhm.
Whatever. Hierarchy and not even hierarchy, just like levels of the company. Um, but no, so they were. It was congruent with my time on Supernatural actually, because um, we in season. So I started at the beginning of season 12 um, as an assistant, and then in season 13, uh, we had an episode called Scooby Natural, which is a combination of Supernatural and Scooby Doo. And it, I would argue, is one of our best episodes in the entire world. You very easy to watch it sort of on its own. Like there is no there's not really a need to know what was going on before the episode or after if you just want to pick it up there. But it truly is such a like gem of an episode. And that was pitched by Jeremy Adams, who is also now a really wonderful comic book writer. Um, but he has been in animation for most of his career and had pitched the idea to my boss Andrew a while back. So we um, I think he pitched it in season 12 because animation takes a little bit of time to uh, get going. And so we knew it was going to be in season 12. We knew it couldn't, we didn't know what the myth was going to be at the time. So it couldn't be too load bearing in terms of the overall story of Supernatural. Anyway, so I met Jeremy and Jim Krieg, who also is one of the beloved producers and sometimes writer of many of the DC movies. And so I very much was like, I love these guys. I want to talk more about animation because I love animation. And Jeremy gave me my first episode of DC Superhero Girls, not the TV show, but we were doing YouTube shorts at the time. So I wrote a couple of DC shorts for that. And then they were going to do uh, Justice Society World War II. And they, and Jeremy was like, oh, Megan, I would love for you to, like, brought me in to co-write that with him, basically. Um, so co-wrote that with him. And then, yeah, from there, just started doing more animation stuff.
That's fantastic because you grew up watching
Yeah.
the Justice League TV show, and then you end up right for like a Justice League animated film. It's like that's such a wonderful full circle.
It was.
And
I had a mini breakdown about it. I was like, this is the craziest thing. It was delightful.
and with regards to the Supernatural Scooby-Doo crossover, was that easy enough with the licensing kind of deal? Was that all in-house? Because I know DC Comics had attempted to do some. Uh, they did like Looney Tunes adaptations during Dan DiDio's time, but there seemed to be in a lot of what I was found. I thought Warner Brothers owned Hanna-Barbera and stuff already, but it turns out there was more licensing and back and forth to do with that. How was it like working on it? Was it more complicated than your standard episode just due to like maybe extra admin or?
Not as much admin as we would have expected. You, it's a little bit easier because so Scooby-Doo and Looney Tunes are not Hanna-Barbera, but they are separate licenses that you do just have to sort of navigate. Um, but because they are under the umbrella of Warner Brothers, it was a little bit easier for us to get away with. And also, frankly, um, the biggest supporter of that episode was the head of Warner Brothers Television, Peter Roth, who is, I think, one of he's the sweetest man, the kindest man. Truly, they don't make them like Peter Roth anymore. He is was like the last bastion of old school Hollywood. I have seen him give 3 or 4 speeches um, without cards, and without, like, clearly he had practiced it, clearly he knew it, but it felt right off the cuff. It felt so incredibly like we for the Supernatural 300. Mark Pedowitz gave a speech, which is very nice and very good. He read from cards and it was very good. And then Peter Roth gave a speech, and Peter Roth knew everyone by name. Peter Roth was like, he was just such a like such a so good at his job, and just so like very very what you think of like old Hollywood. Like, that was Peter Roth. He was great at it. And fun fact about Peter Roth, so everything had to go through Peter Roth. He was the one that was like, you had to sort of convince him. For the most stuff, he just sort of like a lot of Supernatural was just, we were sort of left alone basically. He was like, yeah, they're fine, they're working, whatever. He enjoyed us very much. He like enjoyed the show, so he was like, this is fine. But fun fact about Peter Roth, early on was an executive on Scooby-Doo, like way, way, way back in the day. Like, that was his show that he was an executive over. And so he loves Scooby-Doo. And when Andrew and our other boss, Bob Singer, the other showrunner for Supernatural, were working through the concept of it and working through all of that, there was no one who was more enthusiastic or excited about it than Peter Roth. And so I think it was very much a like, we will make this happen by any means necessary.
Brilliant, brilliant.
Yeah.
And so then, how was the step into comics then as well? Because again, still Warner Bros. With DC. How did that come about? Did you approach DC Comics, or did they approach you about writing?
I had been working on my own sort of comic. So this was the thing. I'm very grateful for the way that things have unfolded in my life, but also at the same time, I have worked very hard for things to unfold in this way. Like, animation was one that I hadn't really ever seen animation scripts before, so that was a learning curve. But TV, I had been working to write TV, and I had been writing a lot of scripts, so I sort of knew what the format looked like, and I understood the purpose for different aspects of the medium. Comics, about a year into working at Supernatural, I was like, okay, cool. I now have this job, and this job feels working on Supernatural was like the most stable job in all of Hollywood, because I was like, this isn't going anywhere until the boys are done with it. Like, this is fine. So I was like, cool. I don't have to like panic about work anymore, which is what I had been doing up to that point. Is like, what's the next thing? What's the next thing? So I could like sort of pull back and go, okay, I've got this part of TV sort of, I know in what direction I want to go, and I know what I'm learning from there. That is going to keep moving ahead. I really want to figure out both audio and comics. Those were two that I was like, I know that I want to write these. I have no clue what to do. So for comics, especially, I went back to my old faithful, which was Finding in Class. Midtown Comic, not Midtown, because Midtown's still around. Meltdown Comics was a really big, wonderful comic shop in LA that has since closed, and it was very, very sad. But Meltdown used to have classes that you could learn how to do comics and how to write comics, what they sort of look like. So I started taking classes there, and I started to like practice writing comics for that. And I'm not an artist, but I would like draw a little bit to figure out like how much is too much, how much is not enough, like what is just getting the hang of it. And I was very lucky. I became friends with I think she was an assistant editor at the time, but she's now an editor at DC. She's very fancy and impressive, and I love her. Her name is Andrea Shea. I became friends with her around that time, and so she and I would chat about it, and she would give me sort of like, okay, so like this works, this doesn't. Like, we would chat a little bit. Like, it wasn't like she was going to get me in at all in comics, but she was very much like supportive of my interest in it. So I had been trying to learn as much as I could and doing all the tools, and like, as is for most things, I have to make my own thing before I fully understand it. So I was making my own comic, as well as making my own audio thing. And then I think it was the beginning of 2020. I had been doing some animation at this point as well. And so DC Animation got a call, sort of company wide, from DC Comics being like, if you guys have any animated people, like any animation people, anybody is interested in writing comics, like send them our way. And so I think it was my boss and also Jim Krieg who was like, is this something? Would you want to do this? And I almost died from excitement. I was like, are you kidding me? Yes. So I we got called into a meeting, and we sort of like and it was Dan Didio was still there. Um, one of the weirdest meetings of my life, frankly. I think I've said this many times before, but it was a very strange meeting. But and it wasn't just me; it was a bunch of people. There were like a bunch of people around the table, and we were sort of talking about comics and about working for comics, and if that was something that interesting us. And yeah, and so it was like, okay, cool. Yeah, we would like to do this. Do you want us to do this? How do we do this? Um, and I chatted with a couple different editors there, pitched on a couple different stories, ended up getting a 2-issue on Robin Eternal for the Future State, where I worked with Paul Kaminsky, who is wonderful and is now the group editor for the Superman group, which is great. And Dave Wilgus, who is now a writer in his own right. He's very good. He's also a very good editor, and became my editor on some of the Tim Drake stuff. And so, yeah, so I sort of like sidestepped into a lot of things, but I'm very grateful for it, and a very it's often not helpful when people are like, so how did you get here? And I'm like, I don't know. In a roundabout sort of manner, but I'm here now.
No, it's amazing to sit back and hear these stories, and I always appreciate, like as you were saying, you didn't go to film school, but you did
Nope.
learn. You went off to absorb
Yeah.
information and you created as well. That's
Yeah.
something that no institution on the face of this planet can teach you, is like the
Yeah.
impetus just to go out and do. It's the passion within.
Yeah.
And it's just great. And I think there's going to be a lot of encouragement for those listening into the story, because as you said, you left knowing no one, not
Yeah.
knowing much within the field itself, the craft, but you picked it up because many people would think, students, they have it in their
Yeah.
minds preset, I can never do this. Everyone starts there, you know?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's fantastic to hear.
I do think that, like, that at the end of the day, more than anything else, like, you do not need
Mhm.
to have gone to school already for
Mhm.
it. You do not need to know anyone. I cannot stress enough. I knew nobody.
Mhm.
Nobody. I got my Warner Bros. That's not true in the sense only that a friend of mine that I went to high school with had also moved out a couple months before me, but also she knew no one. But
Mhm.
she heard about this job and that she then told me about, you know what I mean? Like, it, the thing that I'm getting at is that I knew no one, but I
Mhm.
made friends. This is
Yeah.
always what anybody that is new or trying to get into any form of entertainment, it is not networking, it is making friends. People get very, very weird about, either they're like very fake about their networking, or they're like, I don't want to do it, I just think it's bad. Cool, fine. If it is not helpful for you, do not use the word networking. Just make friends, because all anyone is ever trying to do is make cool shit with their friends. And like, that is true in comics. I love making comics with artists that I am friends with. I love making TV with other writers who I think are brilliant. I love making animation with storyboard artists and actors. Like, it is all from friends. So
Mhm.
just make friends. Whenever people would get very like, I remember when I first moved to LA, and I was nannying, and people were like, "Oh, well, I'm just gonna wait until I get a job in, like, I'm gonna get a PA job in a writer's room." And I was like, "Why? Why are you waiting? Why?" And a lot of people would say then, like, "Oh, well, because uh, if I wanted to, like, work at Target or work at Tesco or work at wherever, I would stay home because it's cheaper." And I was like, "I get that. I absolutely understand. In big cities, especially, sometimes it feels cost prohibitive. You will not meet the same people who want to make things. And I think that to me is the most crucial, is finding people who want to make things with you, being friends and saying, I just want, like in LA specifically is I think the best example for this. LA is just filled with people. And I don't think anymore, it used to be you had to live in LA to do anything in film and TV. I don't know. TV is still a little bit that, but I don't think that's true for film at all anymore. But what I will say, and what is very useful for moving to LA or moving to an a any sort of big town that has a theater or film or whatever culture, is that LA is an industry town, and everyone is there to pursue a dream in a way that you can sort of spark up a conversation with somebody at the coffee shop that you've gotten a job at, and they are probably also wanting to make something. You have to find people to make things with you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's the collaborative nature as well
Yeah.
of any
Yeah.
medium, and like that's what, the reason why we're an academy and we don't use the word school or college is because technically there's different connotations to what a school, particularly here in Ireland, what a school and a college is.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we're an academy. The idea is that we kind of have we have a structure for those who want to be more of a student, but like to help guide, get that kind of support. But we don't set up as a traditional classroom. I remember you saying, like you yourself, you're not built for the classroom. So
Yeah. Yeah.
we set up as a bullpen, like the old bullpens, and
Mm,
it's like more of a writer's room. Everyone can move around.
I love that.
Yeah, and we actually have industry professionals who work from here. So Trina Farrell, who's colorist for Batman Doc
Lovely.
Patterns, I think she
Yeah.
actually worked with Andrea as well on the DC Pride
I'm
magazine.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. That sounds
But
right. Yeah.
and it's just great because again, someone who has no experience is coming in, as you said, could network, then see Trina, and then you have someone who's working for DC, someone who's literally just
Yeah.
opened up a comic for the first time. That's what it's all about, and it's a
Yeah.
great pleasure when you see that come together. You mentioned just at the start of the conversation just about some of the extra layers of difficulty that female creators would face as well coming into the comics industry and just entertainment industry in general. How, in your experience, have you found the current room temperature? I suppose how matters have been developing. Have you seen an improvement from whence you first began, or is it still a lot more of change to come?
There's a lot more change to come. Um, I think we were on a bit of an upswing, and for I think not surprising reasons,
Hmm.
it's pulled back a bit,
Hmm.
um, which is a shame. Um, I think as people, but also as the industry is constricting, and like as any industry is constricting, we are right now, that's a fairly normal thing. But what ends up happening is that people become afraid. And so when people become afraid, they close ranks and they make it, they're not thinking about accessibility. They're not thinking about um, as wide a voice, because what they're frankly thinking about is, but what about me? And the truth of the matter is we are all going to be okay. It will. Like
Hmm.
it is going to be okay. Um, it will not be okay for the people. It will not be okay if we only live in fear. We cannot live in fear. As artists, as creatives, we cannot live in fear. That is the death knell for all of our industries, frankly, is if we live in fear. Um, so I think is my biggest sort of observation at the moment, is there's a lot of people living in fear. And frankly, it comes from, I hear this a lot, and like I get where it's coming from, and it's coming from a place of fear. But I heard this a lot when I was, in TV spaces. I've heard this a lot in comic spaces. Um, Weirdly, I've not heard this a lot in audio spaces, but I think that's because audio is still such a small industry that there's not there's everyone's sort of like, we're used to fear. This is fine. Um, but in other spaces, I have heard a lot of, oh well, it must be really easy for you because you're a woman, and that's what people are looking for. And first of all, a wild thing to say out loud to anyone. Um, but I do hear that a lot. Um, and I very much would love to challenge that for people. It is just as difficult. Um, that to hear yourself when you're saying and then just sort of like recognize and question that within yourself. Because I think that that is the more like, because once again, it comes from a space of fear. It comes from a space of fear, quite often from men who are in these spaces who are like, oh, but I am worried that my story and my voice does matter. It does. It absolutely does. It has never stopped mattering. Everyone's voice matters. But everyone has to include everyone. Everyone has to include me. It has to include younger writers, writers from different backgrounds, writers from different spaces and worlds and things like that. Like, um, it is what we are working for is that everyone is equitable. Um, and that does mean that you have to be good at your job. Um, and you have to do the storytelling. I think a thing that I noticed more so in TV necessarily than in comics, but a thing that I noticed a lot in TV is whenever I would hear that, it generally came from uh, folks who frankly just didn't have a good script.
Yeah.
Like
Hmm.
I was like, oh, you are just as valuable, but this is not the good representation of your voice. Um, build it, build like learn more, do the work, like figure out how to tell a better story. If people are not vibing with that, I've had people not vibe with. I cannot tell you how many pitches I have done. There is a story that is very near and dear to my heart that no one wants to do, and that's fine. It's not messing with anybody. It's not attaching to them the way that it attaches to me. Maybe that means that I need to give it up entirely. Maybe it means I need to put it on the back burner for a later time. But like what ultimately that is saying to me is that that is not a correct that is not the correct strength of my voice at this moment. And when we're all vying for jobs, we have to be good at our jobs. We have to be the top version of ourselves. Um, and so I once again I think it goes back to, for me, where is that concern coming from, or where is that voice coming from? If it's a space of fear, there is no space for that.
Hmm.
You are doing yourself a disservice of existing and living in fear.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's what in this day and age, there should be no blockage to if you have a story to tell.
Yeah,
There's many platforms and means to tell
there's
it.
so many ways. Yeah,
This is it. Like literally, as the guy who set up an academy, I just said I'll set it up. You can just do it.
yeah,
But what's what I can't abide and what's unforgivable are those who are deliberately trying to intercept or block the path of another,
yeah,
which you can see happen at times. Like, but there's no need, or
yeah,
if people are frustrated, if you even historically speaking, if you look at some of the biggest, characters and stories, it often is derived from people who were told no or had something taken from them or blocked or it
yeah,
didn't work out,
yeah,
and they go forge their own path. So, and
yeah,
folks who might be listening and they do a project and then they realize it didn't take off the way they wanted,
yeah,
as you were saying, it's very all star Superman. It'd be hard, right? But it's it is true. There will come a time when it does work
yeah.
out like what you want, and then you look back and you'll be happy that it happened at that moment, not previously,
Yes,
because
yes,
you'll be the strong for it. And I know it sounds at times when you listen to this and you're in that spot of just being told a no, and it
yeah.
sounds like blowing a lot of smoke, but really, people who've gone through that can tell you, no, this is
100%.
it. Yeah.
It's so annoying. And like, listen, if you are listening to this and you are like, I'm so tired of this, or this is so trite. Like I recognize that. Like I've been in that and I've had people tell me the same thing, and it's so annoying. It's so annoying because you are so tied to it. And that I think is something worth trusting. And also like I'm not saying that your fear isn't real and valid. It absolutely is. I'm 100% understanding that like times are scary. And in fairness, if we are in creative industries, it will always be scary.
Hmm.
So this is a thing to learn and go, okay, you will always feel this way. A current thing that's happening in TV right now that I think is good, especially in American TV, is that the budgets are constricting and going away. And like there are a lot of people who are like, but I was making X amount of money and I'm not making that anymore. Yeah, because that is the course of art. Like that has been the history of art. We were living in and television was living in a time where like more money was coming in. That is the rarity. The commonality of making art and being a creative is having to constantly push for it. And that is something that like we as artists, we have to contend with. We have to recognize, like, is this something that I want to do? You have to wake up and make that choice every day. And it's okay if you make that choice one day that you're like, I don't want to do this anymore. Totally fair. I often am like, I would love a 401k. I would love it. I would love nothing more than a retirement fund. I would love nothing more. And I'm working towards it. And maybe like, I have like little steps and little strides and things like that. But like, we are not promised that in art. Maybe we should, maybe we shouldn't be. I don't know. Historically, in art, that has not been the case. We are still like what we do still matters, and it it has to be important, and it has to be worth that sacrifice. But it is a sacrifice. It is hard, and it is um a scary, it is scary. Like there's no world around it. Like that is why sometimes the advice feels trite, and that's why sometimes it feels like everyone is like against you, and because this is hard what we do.
Mhm.
Um, but that doesn't mean don't do it. That just means that it is hard sometimes.
Yeah. And the reward at the end when you do see it, no matter what it is, your first book, your
Yeah.
first sign for an IP, whatever it is, that's the reward that comes at the end of it. You
Yeah.
can't have the shadows out the light or the light out the shadows.
Yeah. I love that. Yeah, exactly.
So, Megan, where can folks follow you online or get behind your latest projects if you have news to share or if they want to keep in touch or follow what you have coming in the future? Where would be the best place to do that?
Yeah, I'm on all social platforms. I try and update them all. I definitely have some favorites. I'm probably more active on the rest, but I am on all of them. Megfitz 89, just pretty consistently across the board. I also have a website, Meghan Fitzmartin, Meghanfitzmartin, where if anybody wants to reach out and has a question, like I am always around and I'm always happy to chat about this.
Whoops.
Own. And I think that like that's what I think what you guys are doing is so beautiful, is like creating space and community uh to build that and to have other people, but like knowing that you're not alone when you are creating something is, I think, incredibly important. So I'm
Oh,
around.
that's amazing. Thank you so much. Literally, as we come towards the end, my signal once more decides to start cutting out, so we made it just in just in time. But
We did.
but blue sky is the one you were saying is the main account that you're most prolific on at the moment, yeah?
Blue Sky and Instagram are
Yes.
probably the two that that I do the most at. Yeah, and it's yeah, Megfitz 89 sort of across the board. And then like I said, my website, which is linked in all of the spaces as well if you have any questions. So
But I also have to say, obviously, we communicate. I first found you through your website contact page, but some of the other guests we had, the Crazy Eight crew, come on and talk to us as well. Bob Greenberger, and I was noticing on their website the FAQ and interaction, and on your website, I noticed you tell it as a story. It's great. It's like it's like because you're a storyteller, so this the narrative. I'm always appreciative of good, thought into the website design that
thank you.
reflects.
That's very kind.
So.
That is all my spouse. I am horrible at all forms of graphic design or marketing. It's something that I do believe that is just part of the job now, so I'm trying to be better at it. Um, but no, that is entirely my spouse. I
Full
uh,
credit to him.
yeah, exactly.
But no, thank you so much again. This is a pleasure to talk to you, and best of luck with everything. And hopefully, our paths will cross again in the near
Thank
future.
you so much. Thank you
Thanks
so
so
much
much.
for having me. This was lovely.
My thanks again to Megan for joining me in this episode. I thoroughly enjoyed our conversation. It was fantastic insight. It's very encouraging to hear and for her to share her experience as well. I hope you all enjoyed it as much as I did in engaging in this conversation, and be sure to follow Meghan online as well and see what's coming out next with Meghan. She's a very approachable, very friendly, very engaging individual. I can't highly recommend enough, and I know whatever the next project is, I'll definitely be there as well to pick it up. So thanks again, and until next time, this has been a copyright production of Macaulay Consultancy 2025.